In this tutorial, we're looking at how to come up with a quick lighting and texturing concept using paintover and photobashing techniques inside of Photoshop. The goals of this image are to illustrate the arrival of a maybe exploring party coming across this sort of ancient temple where there's this central figure, this dominant central figure of the bust of King Kong in this case. And we want to illustrate that sort of first contact. We want to emphasize that they've probably traveled a long way, so we're going to utilize night time as the time of day when they've reached the place. We'll also have probably some lighting coming off their lanterns, so instead of just one one figure, we'll have probably a party, so there'll be a couple of different warm light sources coming through from this direction. So the direction of these lights is also going to help to communicate sort of the design of this one point perspective, taking the directional lines back down towards this central figure, emphasizing its sort of like dominance, as well as the exterior lights. The key light is going to be a major part of this lighting system. So we're going to have it bounce down on the ground and then bounce up onto the figure, and that will be like a fill light to get rid of any of the sort of harsh shadows created by the key light. And we'll also want to make it quite three-dimensional, this shape, so we'll use some rim lighting around the edge of the character to emphasize this sort of dominance and sort of aggression. We're also going to probably have some light as if it's bouncing off the ground up onto the ceiling and then back down onto Kong here, just to darken the brow here and get some real sort of shadows inside the eyes and so forth, and try and make it look even a little bit more tougher. So in editing this image, we want to try and maintain a non-destructive workflow as much as possible. So that means basically that we're not going to delete pixels or permanently change pixels as far as possible. So we'll use things like adjustment layers to manage that, as well as layer masks to hide and reveal different elements. So the first thing I want to do is just change this the levels of this AO render that's come out of Maya using Arnold. And to do that, I'm going to the adjustment layers and click on the levels, and that's going to allow me to then make this a little bit darker, just giving those extra shadows and so forth. I might just move the midtones across a little bit as well, like so. Okay, so let's start off by putting in sort of a sky in the background. It's a really good idea to have your own image library, and especially your own images, even better. So when you go out and get reference images around. I like to use Lightroom to manage catalogs of images, and I've just gone through my my references, and I've grabbed everything that I thought might be useful for this project. So we're going to start off by bringing some of those images into Photoshop. So I'm going to do that by just dragging the images into my scene. And the first one we're going to look at is, perhaps the night sky. So I've got a couple images here that of sort of nighttime that might be useful in this. So this is a concept art. So it doesn't really, we're not really concerned too much about pixel quality and so forth. We just want a quick impression of what our scene could be like. So I'm going to grab this image, and I'm just going to put it into my scene. And I'm quite lucky in regards to this AO, is that these windows are already sort of cut out by the alpha, because I saved it out as a TIFF from Maya. So I can just quickly drag this image below the other one, and then sort of position it until I'm happy with it. Okay, so you can see what's happened here is that my image has also had the levels adjusted to it, because when we do the levels, it is adjusting everything underneath this level with this new calibration. So to isolate it to just the layer below, we can click on this icon here, and now we can sort of see that inside there. So I'll just go back to my layer and just size it up a little bit, like so. And I'm just going to duplicate it quickly by moving and holding down the Option key or Alt key, and that's just going to duplicate it for down the other end there, like so. Okay, so that might be a little bit hard to see for you, but I'm just going to quickly change the levels. All right, so one thing that I wanted to mention is, so I'm working out of Maya using a TIFF, and I've saved it out just quickly using the render window. So it saved it out as a 32-bit float image, so it's quite a large image. We probably don't need it to be a 32-bit float image, so we're going to just change it down to a 16-bit image. Now, I'm not going to merge those together. So in doing so, there's quite a few tools that won't operate in Photoshop when it's a 32-bit image, but you do get that bigger dynamic range. So for us, we don't really need the 32 image. 16 is going to be plenty, and we could even bring it down to 8 if we like. But I'm bringing some raw images across, so it's probably best to keep it up a little bit. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can quickly go in and use an adjustment layer on here and just change the contrast of that, the brightness of that using curves by just dragging that middle section up. All right, so I'm happy for the exterior. I'm not sure how much you can see it in the video, but I can start to see some clouds, some light source from the moon itself, and there's even some tree silhouettes in there as well. So now I'm going to sort of block in the different elements, being the ground, the walls, and the pillars, and worry about Kong a little bit later on. So first of all, I'm going to grab some reference images. I think I'll use this one here as the ground. I'll just drag that on top, like so. And I'm going to edit this image. At the moment, it's a smart object, so I'm just going to right click on the image and rasterize the layer, so it's not just brought in as a reference. And there's some stuff in here that I like. I'm going to use this as the floor, so I don't want to get those elements in there as well. So I'll just quickly create a selection here, like so. And I might turn this into a tileable texture. So I'll just Command C to copy that, and I'll just open up a new window with the clipboard, paste that into my area here, and quickly create a tiled version of this. And I'm going to do that through Filter, Other, Offset, and just change the borders, as it were. So it's bringing the border on the edge into the middle, and it's brought the top border and bottom border. Can't even see where that is. So let's just, it's pretty good. There it is. It's in the middle now. There. So just off the bat, this looks pretty good. It doesn't, I could have got away with it without doing this, but just to show you the process. So quickly, I'm just going to use the patch tool. So the patch tool is one of the sort of cloning brush tools. So with the patch tools, I prefer to use this one where we can just draw around the area that we want to sort of clean up, like this sort of area here, and then we move it to select something that sort of matches similar, and then we sort of let go to, uh, make it sort of work. I'll try it with this section here, like so. And yeah, you can do this as gently as you want, and then sort of play around to try and make things work. Um, if you want to get rid of a whole stone, which is a good idea sometimes, you could come in here and do things like that. So this bit here is probably, and basically you just want to sort of remove any um, inconsistencies and so forth. So I won't worry about that too much, but you get the idea. Let's try that again. Nothing too close. I'll do. All right, so what's really cool about this sort of technique is once you've established a tileable texture, you can then select all uh, by pressing Control A or Command A on a Mac, and going up into Edit and Define Pattern. So this then saves it as a pattern, which is super cool because we can go in and go to our image. I'll just get rid of that layer now. I'll just delete that layer, yes. And I'm going to put in a new layer and go to my paint bucket and just fill the whole area in white, which is fine. Double click on the layer, brings up the layer styles, and under pattern overlay, I can go in and select that new pattern that I've just created. So what's also super handy about this is we can change the scale. So if we need to change the scale, you don't want to go up too much, but something like that's going to be good for most of the purposes of this, and like so. So now I've got a large sort of chunk of flooring or wall. I'm going to utilize it as part of the ground. Now, to see what I'm doing, I can quickly come in and make a duplication of our original AO layer. So let me just call that AO. It's good to keep track of these things. And I'll just duplicate that and then take that and raise it above all our image. And instead of the layer blending mode being normal, we'll set that to, say, multiply. Oh, actually, screen. We might need to change the levels on AO. And I'll just do it to the layer underneath. Like so. And let's try multiply again. Yep, starting to. I can make that out. Okay, so first of all, the perspective of this image is not what we want. So I'm going to edit the perspective. So come down to floor. Now, in doing so, I'll need to change the overlay from pattern to be sort of rasterized, so it just becomes permanent. So right click on the layer, come up to a rasterized layer, and then now that's going to turn that into just solid pixels rather than that layer style. So pressing Command A again selects all of the image, and then Command T allows you to scale it and so forth. But instead of scaling it, we want to distort it, and we want to be able to change the perspective of the image. So I'm just going to quickly sort of get this image so that's lining up with the ground. All right, so there's our floor, and then again I'll do the same process for the walls, but instead of doing a pattern this time, I'll just apply it in there. Let's load this up as a selection. So to do that, because that's the only thing in the layer, if we go over our icon and hit the Command key, we get that little box indicating that it's going to load the layer as a selection, which is a really quick way. So then press Command T again, and we're going to right click, distort, and make these walls. Like so. All right, so we're going to do that for the other side as well. So I'll just call that wall R for right. I'll just drag it down, duplicate it, and then select all and right click and just flip horizontally, and it's going to go to the other side. Cut out the windows from this wall. So to do that, we're going to utilize the original image. So if I just hide these for a second, and remember we've got these sort of cut out areas here. So to load that up as a selection, again, if I scroll over it and press Command on a Mac and click, and then I load that in as a selection. And the beauty of this next process is that we can use what's called layer masks, and that's where you're cutting out a layer, but you're not removing the pixels, you're just hiding them. So to do that, we'll go to our wall right, and with that selected, we'll click on the layer mask, and that will load it up as a selection. So the layer mask is this little icon here, and white is revealed and black is hidden, and grey is a combination of the two. So we'll utilize those as we move forward. So for the roof now, okay, so I've blocked in the space. Now I'm going to worry about the pillars and the central figure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some layer masks so I can control the area. Now, so let's start with our central figure, and I'm going to quickly use the pen tool to make a selection of this area. So clicking and dragging the pen tool out brings out these little handles. Now, if you're not used to using the pen tool, I suggest you find some tutorials and you practice it. There's lots of techniques. But basically, the technique that I use is I click and then I drag at the handles and I point the handle in the direction that I want the new line to go. And if you have to edit it, you can go back and use the command key and just move it around or move them around. So now that I've traced it around the figure, I'm going to go into paths and load this up as a selection. So to do that, I scroll down here and there's this little button here and they'll load it as a selection. And if I go back to layers now, and I'm going to duplicate my AO layer. So I've got another copy and use a layer mask to cut out Kong. So in doing so, there you can see that working. I'm just going to rename it. Like so. So I'm going to do the same process now for the pillars. Again, making a layer mask to isolate them out. So now I have the pillars. Now, the good thing about layer masks are that we can go in and edit them really quickly. So if I just load up the layer mask, you can see what it is. So it's black and white information. So with like a quick brush, I can go in, whoops, and edit. I'll just bring up a little and change my over. I can quickly go in and just paint in sort of areas that I want to attract. So I'll just grab another brush. And so I can quickly just come in here and just paint in the areas that I want to select or reveal in this case. So like so. It's just because I quickly overlapped the selection. I'll just have a look there almost. Okay, so now I've made the selection for the pillars. Let's make the pillars. And to do that, I'm going to utilize another texture. And yeah, I think I'll just use the same one as we did for the walls. As if they're smaller bricks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a similar sort of technique, but instead of, well, let's first of all go in and grab this layer mask and load it as a selection. So command click on it, and now that's everything's loaded as a selection. So then I'll go into this layer itself and I'm just going to load a layer mask onto there like so, and now this image can only be seen in that space. So if I move it around, it'll move with the mask. However, if I unclick this little chain light icon in between them and then move my texture, oops, make sure my texture is selected. So see this white box around the layer mask? I need to make sure it's on the texture. So then I can move the texture within that space. So what I'm going to quickly do is just duplicate this texture and the layer mask and go through and just make a pillar, and I think I will merge them down. So merge layers. So I've just selected all those layers and I'll go in and merge layers together. So that's now merged. Oh, that's a bad idea because it's going to mean that we'll get rid of those layer masks. So I'll just, before we do that, I'll remove the layer mask on each of those. So delete layer mask, delete layer mask. Okay, so what I have now is like just the raw sort of image, which is good. And again, I'll go in, first of all, I'll grab those four and I'll merge those layers down, like so. And now I'll load up another layer mask, unclick the connection so I can move them around separately, and then move the bricks around. I won't worry about the one behind, that's fine for now. And to make them look round, I'm going to go into Command T, which is going to let me transform them, and then quickly right click on and go warp, and the warp is going to allow me to basically curve those points down as well as the top ones. So we get sort of the curvature of that pillar, like so. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And instead of doing that for all of them, I'm just going to delete the layer mask for a second and just come in and scale it over the other objects, the other one at the front, like so. Load up the layer mask. Sorry, we'll merge those together. Call them front. And do this repetitively for each of the pillars. Okay, so here we got our columns, and this is basically the base. I might just quickly go in and change the contrast of the AO over the top so we can sort of see what's going on a little bit better, like so. And so now this is our base. I'm now going to go in and give texture for Kong in the same way. And just slightly paint in with a low value to reveal some of the elements that I want out of those two textures. So I'll get a nice sort of soft brush So I can change the hardness, so the hardness is quite low, and the opacity I'll just bring right down so that when I'm painting onto it, I'm just increasing it a little bit. So if I bring that up, you can see that I'm just hiding some of those elements that I don't want out of the particular textures. So maybe just around its face, the top here. I kind of like that sort of scar look across its face a little bit. And just so it doesn't look like it's flat, just remove some of it. And just playing with the opacity as well, just because I don't want to remove the form, so I want to make sure it still looks three-dimensional. I can improve that a little bit later with colouring it as well. So to manage this a little bit better, I'm just going to bring all those guys in together. I'll take it underneath that AO. Oh, this is going to change it a bit. Grab those guys, put them into a layer or a group. Like so. Okay, so I might focus on Kong now and look at how we go about relighting stuff. So to relight elements, a good way to do that is to just duplicate that group, grab it, chuck it down into a new layer, and I'm just going to merge the group into one solid thing. And inside this group, I'm then going to change the levels. And I'm going to do it through curves again and just increase like so. Just make sure it's doing it to the one underneath. Happy with that. But now I'll create a layer mask for that particular element, and with the black I'm going to move where I want the highlights, that new lighting to be. So just bring up the opacity so you can see it a bit clearer. And this is a way of just relighting our scene. That's looking okay. The same thing, but this time for the shadows. Okay, so I've got it to somewhere where I'm happy with it. Um, I'm just sort of blocking in the overall color and tone, giving a sort of a sense of shape rather than lighting at this stage. Um, so now what I'm going to do is start adding some detail because everything's very similar, so there's not much interest. So I'm just going to go through and do a process of bringing in an image like so, and I'll bring this above everything. I'll do that again. So make sure I'm at the top. In fact, I think I might organize things a little bit more by grabbing everything and putting it into. So I'll bring in some sort of textures, overlays, which I'll use to, change things up a little bit. So to do this, a similar sort of method, come in and use like a multiply overlay, um, and distort it so it matches sort of the walls and whatnot, where we want to place it in. So just sort of blocking it in really quickly to start with, and then sort of cut back with the layer masks to, just make it go on certain areas, like so. Okay, so now I'm going to create the lighting for the scene. So in doing so, I've put my base and my overlays into a new environment folder, and I'm going to take that folder and adjust um, the, just make it brighter. So bring everything up to where the sort of the brightest area would be, something like that. And now, using a layer mask, I'm going to hide bits that I don't want to be there. Um, I'm going to do it in sort of reverse. So I wanted some light to come out from this section, and I might just do this just like a garbage mask, like super quick. And these are the sort of areas that I want to be illuminated, like so. And also coming down from the window here onto the floor and then back up. Like so. So I'm not sure what, delete that layer mask, vector mask. Um, so that's my selection. Now to fill that in, I'm going to fill it with the foreground color, so Alt Delete. And it's exactly the opposite what I wanted. So I'm going to reverse that whole image by Command I, which goes to inverse. And yeah, that's getting there. So using the paintbrush, just going to soften those edges of where things are and how it's looking. Remembering that idea of trying to point towards Kong, and also Kong needs to be illuminated. So I'm going to use my pen and bring back, make sure I've got white, and bring back. So it's hitting the ground and bouncing back up. So there'd be a bit of light across the face there. But remember, I wanted that sort of dark shadows on the eyes. So we're kind of pretending that light's bouncing off the top. That's probably a little bit too much. So I'll just bring down the opacity of that. And I might use a more interesting sort of brush so I get a bit of texture. So I can highly recommend these matte Heath brushes. So these are really good. They're sort of painterly effects and whatnot. And there's a whole range there that work really well. So I'll just grab one and see how we go. Maybe the textured version, because we want to start to bring in some texture into our image. I'll just reduce the size down, square bracket, and make sure I'm white. My opacity is right down. Okay, so um, I'm happy with the lighting as it is now. Now I'm going to go and tint the lighting. So to do that, I'm going to create a new layer on top and then just come in with different colors. So I want sort of a blue light for this sort of moonlight coming through. So I'll pick a sort of a light blue, and I'll also put it on sort of lighten, and I'll also reduce my opacity of my brush to sort of do it gradually, see how it goes. Okay, so I'm think I'm pretty much almost finished for this concept. I'll just save it there so I can come back to that in a little bit. So I can really quickly make some changes, explore some different ideas and that sort of thing. Um, but before I sort of leave this one alone, I might just go in and I'll just bring up the navigation again because it's a good way to see how things are looking. And I'll put that on my other monitor because that's a little bit more clearer to the exact colors, where my main monitor is a little bit bright. Um, so I'm now going to just do a little bit of color correction overall and try and just finish off the look. So I'll start with like an S curve um, to try and bring up some sort of drama a little bit. Hopefully not push it too far. That's looking all right. I'll also, according to my other monitor, it's very saturated. I think I'll just desaturate the color values so they start to fit a little bit better. And I even might make it a little bit darker in certain spots. So I'm going to put in another adjustment layer and just make it really sort of dark. It's just these areas over here are just I'm not liking that much. So also another desaturate to get rid of. That's better, but then take those guys and I'll put them in a group and then do a layer mask for both of those. So I just want that area there. An easy way to do that is to just paint that area black and then inverse the whole thing. Didn't quite get it enough. It's on too low a value, that's why. That's better. So I'm just bringing in some darkness. And yeah, I might just quickly relight it a little bit more. Bring up the opacity of those areas. And yeah, keep going. I think I've gone a little too far with that darkness, so bring it back like so. I do have quite a difference on these two monitors. So on the main monitor here, I'm quite happy with, but the other monitor is too high a contrast. So maybe I'll grab just lighten it a bit. A little bit of desaturation and maybe a few more curves. That's starting to look good on the other monitor. So I'm guessing that's the one to go for. Alrighty, so that's looking pretty good. There's another little trick you can do, which is really nice, is come in and apply a smart blur. I'm still working at 16-bit here, so I'll change that mode to 8-bit. And I'll just save this for a sec. Save. And I'll come in and I'll flatten this image. And then File, do the same thing. So come in here with the smart blur and what it does, it sort of blends it together. Like so. And then we'll go and unsharpen mask on top of that. And that also just helps to bring the pixels and the density together to make it look like it's part of the one image. Alright, so there we go. That's the end of sort of a quick concept using a paintover and photobashing inside of Photoshop.